On its path from San Diego, California to Savannah, Georgia, U.S. Highway 80 spans a narrow band of South Alabama called the Black Belt because of its dark, fertile soil. Huge cotton plantations flourished here before the Civil War, and cotton production remained the primary industry until prices fell prior to and during the Great Depression. Cotton is still a major industry in the Black Belt, but soybeans, cattle, and catfish are also popular. Highway 80 connects a series of towns that have grown up around cotton gins and river landings used to ship cotton to market. The largest towns are Demopolis, Selma, Montgomery, and Tuskegee. In between are smaller towns. Many are struggling to survive. The Black Belt is the birthplace of two American revolutions, the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement. History is important to people here. Their history shows how our nation has dealt with its major conflicts. Join us now on a driving tour through history as seen across Alabama's Black Belt on U.S. Highway 80. We'll begin our journey in Demopolis and travel east across the Black Belt to Tuskegee, stopping at towns along the way to look at their history. When construction of Highway 80 reached Demopolis in 1919, folks came up with a unique method for raising money to build a bridge across the Tombigbee River. They invited dignitaries to send roosters that were sold in an auction. President Woodrow Wilson received his invitation to participate while he was meeting with leaders of other countries, and all of them sent roosters. Movie stars Fatty Arbuckle and Mary Pickford sent roosters, and Helen Keller sent a hen. The original bridge has been replaced, but the current bridge is still called the Rooster Bridge. Demopolis was founded in 1817 by a group of people who had been exiled from France. They had supported the Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, but when Napoleon was defeated, they had to leave to save their lives. These French aristocrats were not accustomed to hard labor and life in the wilderness. When they were granted amnesty by the French government, most of the original colonists returned to France. The growth of Demopolis is due to ambitious pioneers who came here from Virginia and the Carolinas to grow cotton. Alabama became a state in 1819. It was the new frontier then, and land was cheap. Cotton plantations were established across the Black Belt, and plantation owners made great fortunes. Located on a white bluff along the Tombigbee River is the home of plantation owner, lawyer, and statesman Francis Strother Lyon. Bluff Hall was built in 1832. The Lyon plantation consisted of over 2,000 acres. Francis Strother Lyon served in the Alabama State Senate for several years, and in 1835 he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served until the Civil War. During the war, he was a member of the Confederate Congress and frequently entertained Confederate generals at his home. Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederate States, was also a guest here. Bluff Hall is maintained as a museum by the Marengo County Historical Society. Gaineswood in Demopolis is one of the best examples of Greek Revival architecture in America. It was the home of Nathan Bryan Whitfield, who owned over 7,000 acres of plantation land and 255 slaves. Before he moved to Alabama, Whitfield served in the North Carolina legislature and became a major general in the North Carolina militia. An injury left him bedridden during much of the Civil War, and he was highly critical of the Confederate government's lack of defenses. A true Renaissance man, he was an artist, an inventor, and a musician. He also designed his own home, including the domed ceilings topped by lantern windows. Gaineswood is the handiwork of slave craftsmen, who worked under Whitfield's close supervision. Restored by the Alabama Historical Commission, the home is open to the public. St. Andrew's Episcopal Church is located just a few miles east of Demopolis. It too was constructed by master carpenters who were slaves. Built in 1853, this house of worship was along a road made of wooden planks that connected Demopolis with other towns to the east. Highway 80 roughly follows the course of this old plank road. Just 7 miles further to the east is the town of Faunsdale. The last census found a population of 60, but the mayor says it's really closer to 200. The town is known around the world for the quality of cattle produced here, and the Faunsdale Bar and Grill is a popular night spot for University of Alabama students from Tuscaloosa to the north. Visiting here on a beautiful spring day, one might get the impression that there's never much activity in Faunsdale, but that is not the case. On the third weekend in April, thousands of people flock to Faunsdale for the annual Crawfish Festival. Over 22,000 pounds of crawfish are consumed each year during the 2-day event that includes arts and crafts, live music, and rides for the kids. The town takes its name from the nearby Faunsdale Plantation, still owned by descendants of the founder, Thomas A. Harrison. But catfish have replaced cotton as the plantation's enterprise. A bell next to the kitchen building used to summon slaves to return from the fields. 2 lowly slave cabins remain, contrasting the lifestyles of slave and master. Each cabin has 1 room and a loft that was used for sleeping. In his book, 90 Degrees in the Shade, author Clarence Kaysen said, "There are only 2 places on the earth fit to live, Paris, France, and Uniontown, Alabama." Quinn Chapel AME Church greets travelers entering Uniontown on Highway 80 by proudly proclaiming that all are brothers. Just a few blocks away, Holy Cross Episcopal Church displays an emblem that might not make everyone feel welcome. Built in 1900, the church honored members who lost their lives in the Civil War with a window displaying the Confederate battle flag. Black residents, who make up the overwhelming majority of citizens here, now own most of the old houses built by whites who worked in the cotton industry years ago. Catfish processing is big business in Uniontown. Our next stop is Marion Junction. People used to come here from miles around to board trains headed to Marion or Selma, but not anymore. The old train depot has been torn down, and all of the stores are closed. Founded in 1818, Selma's strategic location on the Alabama River led it to become an important center of the cotton industry. Businesses relating to the cotton trade developed along the waterfront. Built in 1837, the St. James Hotel is the only antebellum riverfront hotel remaining in the Southeast. During the Civil War, it was managed by a slave named Benjamin Sterling Turner. After the war, Turner became the first black from Alabama elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. The old railroad depot houses a museum that tells Selma's story. Inside are mementos from bygone days that document the development of the Black Belt's cotton culture, including a carriage used by one of the city's first merchants on his annual trips to New York. Selma was one of the South's main military manufacturing centers. Nearly half of the munitions used by the Confederacy were produced here. Only a remnant of the massive Confederate naval foundry remains. In the spring of 1865, the Union Army, led by General James H. Wilson, attacked. Each year, spectators gather to witness a reenactment of the Battle of Selma by over 2,000 participants. Selma fell to an overwhelming Union force, but most of the reenactors here wear gray. 100 years after the Battle of Selma, a different army marched through the streets of the city, and their battle is also reenacted every year. On what has come to be known as Bloody Sunday, state troopers at the Edmund Pettus Bridge attacked 600 civil rights marchers bound for Montgomery. Nationally broadcast images of the beatings aroused emotion across the country. 1 week later, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. led over 3,000 people across the bridge. The march continued along Highway 80 for 5 days and culminated in a rally of over 25,000 supporters at the state capitol. These events led to passage of the National Voting Rights Act of 1965. Brown Chapel AME Church is where the Selma to Montgomery March began. A monument to Dr. King and those who were killed during the voting rights movement has been erected at the church, which was organized by freed slaves following the Civil War. Named for a Confederate general who served in the United States Senate following the Civil War, the Edmund Pettus Bridge carries Highway 80 across the Alabama River in Selma. Because of the events on Bloody Sunday, it has become a nationally recognized symbol of the voting rights movement. Located near the foot of the bridge, the National Voting Rights Museum and Institute commemorates the events and people that led to equal rights for all Americans. Preserved in plaster here are the footprints of participants in the Voting Rights March. There is also a memorial to those who gave their lives in the voting rights struggle. The national importance of the Selma to Montgomery March has led to special recognition for Highway 80 as a National Historic Trail, an All-American Road, and a National Scenic Byway. We'll see several reminders of the march as we travel east toward Montgomery, but the civil rights movement was not the first clash between races here. A few miles east of Selma, a monument along the highway commemorates a nearby Indian village visited by the Spanish conquistador Hernando de Soto. De Soto's army of 600 soldiers marched along the Alabama River on a search for gold in 1540. This first exploration by Europeans led the way for others to follow, sealing the fate of Native Americans. Highway 80 is part of a network of roads that has been designated the De Soto Trail. The town of Benton lies at a bend in the Alabama River. Today, Benton has the look of a quiet residential area, but it hasn't always been that way. Settlers from South Carolina came here as early as 1818, and the town was incorporated in 1834. Because of its strategic location on the river, Benton became a major trading center, serving surrounding counties. Steamers made weekly runs from Mobile, bringing supplies and goods from Europe. They returned to Mobile loaded with cotton from the Black Belt. The town has purchased the old railway station, and it houses the town hall and post office now. It appears that some modern advancements have left Benton behind, but agricultural industry is still thriving here. As Highway 80 travels east from Benton, it winds through Lowndes County, a hotbed of activity during the voting rights movement of 1965. Hundreds of black sharecroppers were evicted from their homes by white landowners for exercising their right to vote. At the intersection where Lowndes County Road 23 leads to the town of Whitehall lies an open field where civil rights workers supplied temporary housing for the evicted families. It was called Tent City, and many consider this field to be sacred ground, a reminder of the sacrifices people had to make. A nearby historic marker commemorates the 1813 battle at a village the Creek Indians called Holy Ground. Of the 33 Creek Indians killed in the battle, 12 were black slaves owned by the Indians. Still further to the east, a monument sits on a lonely hilltop as traffic passes by below. Hardly anyone notices now, but in 1965, the nation was shocked by the death of Viola Liuzzo, a Detroit housewife and mother. Moved by television reports of Bloody Sunday, Liuzzo was among the hundreds of supporters who rushed to Selma and volunteered to help. She was driving marchers back to Selma following the triumphant rally at the state capitol in Montgomery when a bullet shot by a Ku Klux Klansman in a passing car ended her life. Following the Civil War Battle of Selma, the Union Army marched to the east, burning homes and fields. But a quick-thinking doctor saved Lounsboro from destruction. Homes and churches dating from the 1820s still line the streets in Lounsboro because the town doctor met the advancing army and warned them of a smallpox epidemic. Not wanting to catch a deadly disease, Wilson's raiders kept their distance from the town. But the epidemic was just a heroic deception. Topping a church most recently used by the Christian Methodist Episcopal denomination is a louvered belfry from Alabama's first state capitol building in Cahaba. It was brought here by ox-drawn wagon in 1833 when the original State House collapsed. Ongoing restoration of the church has been aided by the Alabama Historical Commission. As we travel to the east, we note yet another special designation given to Highway 80 between Selma and Montgomery. It has been named the Jefferson Davis Highway in honor of the President of the Confederate States of America, who assumed that office when the new nation was created in Montgomery. Montgomery was formed when two early towns in the area literally grew together. It became the state capital in 1846, largely because the cotton planters of the Black Belt had become the state's most powerful political group. The first Capitol building burned, and the present building, located on a prominent hill at the end of Dexter Avenue, was completed in 1851. The Capitol building has been renovated in recent years and serves primarily as a museum, although some state executives, including the governor, still work from offices inside. Just outside the governor's window is a memorial to those who died in service to the Confederacy. Located near the Capitol steps is an imposing statue of Jefferson Davis. Some visitors like to have their pictures taken as they stand on the spot where Davis stood to receive the oath of office. 100 years after Davis assumed office, Martin Luther King Jr. stood on these steps to address 25,000 participants at the climax of the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March. Shortly after Virginia joined the Confederacy, the capital of the southern states was moved to Richmond, but it is from Dexter Avenue in Montgomery that orders to fire on Fort Sumter were issued by telegram. The home that served as the first White House of the Confederacy is just across the street from the Capitol building. Over 100,000 visitors each year, including scores of school children, walk where Jefferson Davis walked and view relics from his life. Following defeat in the Civil War, Davis was imprisoned for 2 years, but he was never brought to trial. Some analysts say that the U.S. government feared a trial would prove the southern states had a legal right to secede from the Union. Like his namesake, Thomas Jefferson, Davis believed that the states should have power to control the issues that affected them most. Other individuals who asserted their rights have also touched Montgomery. In the shadow of the state capitol building stands the Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. served as pastor from 1954 to 1960. A mural along a basement wall illustrates scenes from Dr. King's life. When Rosa Parks was arrested in 1955 for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white man, a meeting in this basement led to the Montgomery bus boycott. From his pulpit, Dr. King urged his church members to unite in a nonviolent protest and became recognized as the spokesperson of a new movement pressing for social equality and equal justice for all races. As the movement grew, he was called to other locations around the country and ultimately left his pastorate here to work full-time with the struggle for civil rights. But he returned to Montgomery in 1965. As he led the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March over a 5-day period, marchers camped in fields along Highway 80 each night. On the final night of the march, they were welcomed by a Catholic mission in Montgomery. The City of St. Jude complex, which included a church, hospital, and school, was the site of a rally featuring performances by celebrities Harry Belafonte, Sammy Davis Jr., Mahalia Jackson, and others. The hospital at City of St. Jude was the first integrated hospital in the Southeast. To the east of Montgomery, Highway 80 narrows to 2 lanes. It passes through Mount Meigs and Shorter, 2 communities that grew along the old Federal Road, the first road developed in Alabama. Mount Meigs is located near an old Indian village that may have been visited by DeSoto. Shorter is best known now as home of the Victoryland Greyhound Racing Track. Our final destination is Tuskegee, a city known for great accomplishments under adversity. At the urging of Lewis Adams, a former slave, and George W. Campbell, a former slave owner, the state of Alabama appropriated funds in 1881 for a school to train black students in agriculture and industry. Under the guidance of Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University, rose to national prominence. A statue on the campus shows Washington lifting the veil of ignorance from his fellow man. Washington's students learned the practical skills of agriculture and industry by growing their own food and constructing campus buildings. Washington stressed excellence in all endeavors. Built in 1899, Washington's home, the Oaks, is maintained as a museum by the National Park Service. It has been preserved as he left it, so visitors can witness the lifestyle he, a former slave, achieved through hard work and education. Across the street, the George Washington Carver Museum commemorates the work of Tuskegee's internationally known scientist and inventor. Carver was employed to teach agriculture, but his natural curiosity and desire to help others led him to make some of the greatest discoveries of his time. The area's economy had been based exclusively on the sale of cotton, but cotton no longer brought good prices. Carver encouraged his students to grow other crops by developing new products made from peanuts, soybeans, and potatoes. His discoveries, ranging from peanut butter to industrial uses for soybeans, created new markets for agricultural products. Tuskegee University grew from a one-room cabin located on the grounds of Butler Chapel AME Zion Church. Founded at the close of the Civil War, the church became headquarters of a Tuskegee voting rights movement long before the Selma to Montgomery March. Following a 1957 effort to minimize the number of black voters by redrawing district lines, a mass meeting at this church led to a boycott of businesses that did not support black voters. Ultimately, a 1961 Supreme Court ruling brought an end to the discrimination. Our tour of Black Belt history comes to a close at Moton Field, where the Tuskegee Airmen were trained in 1941. They not only proved that black men could fly, they became some of the best fighter pilots of World War II.